Welcome to Powered by Snowflake, a series where I interview technology leaders building applications and businesses on Snowflake. I'm your host, Daniel Myers, and today I'm talking with Sean Knapp, founder and CEO of Ascend. Ascend is a data pipeline automation platform powered by Snowflake. Sean, how are you today?
I'm doing great, Daniel. How are you?
I'm doing really well, and I am very excited to get to know more about how Ascend has built this data pipeline automation platform on Snowflake. So really, in your own words, describe to me what is Ascend, and as a founder of the company, tell me about its founding story.
Absolutely. So Ascend is a data pipeline automation platform. We allow and enable our customers to build these intelligent data pipelines by providing really advanced capabilities to build and construct, automate the operation of those pipelines, and then ultimately govern, monitor, observe how those pipelines are running. And we run this by maintaining a tremendous amount of metadata around where your data is coming from, where it's going to, how do we help actually optimize those pipelines. And we do this all on top of Snowflake itself. Now, how we got here, my experience as a data engineer started 19 years ago back at Google. I was a software engineer building a bunch of front-end experiences for web search and analyzing the efficacy of those. So I actually wrote my first big data pipeline using MapReduce back in 2004. And over the course of the last 19 years, I was founder and CTO of a company where we grew to 500 people before we were acquired, had a third of our R&D resources focused solely on data. And I've gone through a lot of that journey of the early days, which is a lot of really rough and raw technology, but you see and feel the potential, to really modern technologies like Snowflake, where we can build just on top of that and solve all of these capabilities and not have to build technology ourselves, ultimately to trying to scale those efforts, and not the scale of how big my data is, but how many things am I building with my data? And that's really where we see the need for automation. That's what compelled me to start Ascend, was this automation layer, so that as I scale and have more people building more data products that are all dependent upon each other, how do we leverage the latest and greatest technologies to automate that and give those users more power and capability?
That's pretty cool. So tell me more about the scale that Ascend is operating at today, and the scale both as a company that you're in, but also the scale of the product that you've built, and what's the amount of data that you in these pipelines that you are that you're doing.
Yeah, so the Ascend as a company, we've been around for just about now 7 years. Our investors are amazing. We have Sequoia and Lightspeed, who are our earliest investors, followed by Excel, and most recently Tiger Global. We have customers around the globe at this point, from Fortune 500 to fast-moving boutique startups. As far as the scale of Ascend, I think the last stats I saw were on the order of hundreds of millions of data processing jobs per month, fully automated and orchestrated by Ascend. And this is across thousands and thousands of data pipelines and data products across our customer base.
That is beautiful to hear. And so to operate at that level of scale, it really seems like you have to, be very careful with what data cloud, Snowflake, for example, that you leverage to build this entire platform on top of. So tell me more about, how did you architect this on top of Snowflake?
Great question. And I think it reminds me of, we have this saying, which is, even metadata is the new big data. And as you can tell from my shirt, we used to always joke, big data is a cluster. It is a complete mess. And that's one of the amazing things about Snowflake, is it makes it very unmessy, very, very fast. And so for how we architected our product on top of Snowflake, is we use Snowflake for all storage, all processing across those data pipelines. And we use a variety of the different capabilities inside of Snowflake to ensure that we get the scalability, the durability, the performance required for how our whole product moves data through the data pipeline, the ELT lifecycle itself.
That's pretty impressive to see. Let's see an architectural diagram of kind of where Snowflake fits into this picture of building these data pipelines.
Yeah, absolutely. When we look at how Ascend fits into the broader platform itself, everything we run on top of Snowflake. The things that we do on top of that are data ingestion, data transformation. The thing you'll see here as I pick up my fancy laser pointer is inside of that build plane itself are all the things that can sit on top of and really drive a lot of workload into and through Snowflake very efficiently. The thing that we do on top of that build plane is what we call our control plane. Inside of the control plane itself, we fingerprint all of the code, all of the data. So we actually can track the lineage of that code and that data and do integrity checks on it. And that allows us to do really smart and efficient propagation very automatically for users as they build those data pipelines. Now, the last part that we put on top is a lot of the governance in the operations plane, the reliability, the data quality checks, the costing measures, the observability capabilities to know that your data pipelines are continuing to run reliably and safely. And so all of these are the capabilities that we are able to use leveraging the Snowflake platform and wrapping around that environment.
It's cool to see how Snowflake really does play a critical, intricate role at each one of those levels, and how you've built this cohesive data pipeline automation platform on top of it all. So from here, I want to see a live demo of all of this working together.
Let's do it. Here we have the Ascend interface. This is a cloud-hosted offering that pushes and runs all of the storage, the workload, the compute, everything on top of Snowflake's data cloud itself. Now, what we're going to do here is we're going to actually build a live data pipeline from scratch in less than 10 minutes. We're going to do this by ingesting multiple data sources, running multiple data transformations, both in SQL and Snowpark for Python. And then we're going to show you all of the data, also how it sits inside of Snowflake itself. So let's hop in. First thing I'm going to do is actually going to ingest a little bit of data here. I'm going to grab some data from Snowflake itself. I've already put some data inside of my Snowflake warehouse. So I'm going to go grab some of that data. In the interest of time, I'm going to simply type in the pieces of data that I know here. And what I'm doing is I'm just pointing Ascend to say, hey, go grab that data from Snowflake itself. I'm also having Ascend configure the schema so we know what we're working with. I'm just going to create a couple of these data sources here. First, I'm going to create some yellow cab data. Second, I'm going to create some green cab data. And then we're going to really be off to the races here. And so as I create these two, you'll see Ascend starts to work its magic. Let me create these two. And then you'll see we have some of our data in. Now, obviously, as I'm creating a data pipeline, I want to be able to look at that data, work with it. I want to be able to check the schemas of that data, which I'm hopefully very familiar with. So it's some of my data. I can go and view some of those records as well. I can also do things like interactively query that data from multiple interfaces. Of course, I can do it from the Snowflake interface, but if I'm building a pipeline, I might want to actually do it from here too. And so one of the things I can do is actually run certain queries. And one of the queries I might want to run here is, let me just go and actually start to augment my green cab data. I really want the schema of my green cab data to match my yellow cab data because I want to start to merge these two together and really start to unify a bunch of data. So I can run these queries. I can also actually convert these into data transforms that will be materialized views inside of Snowflake. It's all fully automated as new data comes in as well. And so you can see, I can actually start to build some really interesting pipelines on top of Ascend. I can now actually join the two of these. And let me go and join these two with another component here. And you'll see all of these are actually starting to show up, not just in my Ascend pipeline, but if I go over here into my Snowflake interface, you'll see that now this data itself is also sitting inside of my Snowflake warehouse. Each of these as new tables themselves. Now what I can start to do is I want to join some of this data. I want to merge it with other data. I have a bunch of weather data that I want to go do some really interesting stuff with. And so if I hop over here, I have a blank canvas right now, but I'm going to go and connect with another data source. I'm going to actually connect with S3. If, for example, I didn't have my data in S3, let's say it was somewhere else, there's an entire library of other connections I can use. But in the interest of the demo, we're going to use the stuff that we already have access to and have set up. And so here, I can actually go in and start looking for my weather data. I can use Ascend to grab this weather data and actually ingest it from outside of Snowflake into Snowflake very quickly and easily, same as I did some of the other data that was already in my warehouse. And I can start to get access to my own weather data here. Now, let's say from this weather data, we want to do something pretty interesting. We want to just not ingest data into Snowflake, but we really want to start to do more transformations and unify these data sets. So let me actually hop over and start to do a few more refinements of this data. First thing I really want to do is I want to create a new data transform, and I want to figure out, is it actually rainy or not? We're going to talk about this a little bit because right now in California, it's pretty darn rainy. And I even grew up in the Northwest, and I still consider this, really quite rainy. So as I go and create this data, I can start to define what do I think is rainy and what is really not rainy. And we'll see as this data goes through, we're creating new tables inside of Snowflake with new sets of records that we can really go and work with itself. One of the things though is as I'm starting to refine that data, let's say, for example, I need to compress this down. This is all the measurements for all the days, and I really just want something that's a little bit tighter. And so I can actually do things like a downstream transform from here and say, hey, I want to actually compress that down. Oh, and this is where Ascend does a great job of checking for me. And it's going to also say, hey, you said you had rainy days, but you actually didn't name that properly. You actually called that maybe rainy. And so you'll see we'll do a bunch of integrity checks itself for our transforms. And now Ascend will allow that through. So that way I'm not introducing broken things into my data pipeline itself.
Beautiful.
Yeah. So now as this is all processing, let's go and actually merge some of this data, because I think that's going to be where it gets really fun. One of the things that we can now do is say, hey, I want to connect that data right here. I want to connect this rainy days data. And I actually want to share this with my other data pipelines inside of Ascend. So now I have access to this. I can hop over here and go back to my taxi cab data and say, you know what? I now want to connect to that. Let me go over here, connect to it. And I now have a new data set here. What I can start to do from there is now let's go and figure out, how do we merge these two? How do we take my taxi cab data and my weather data, and how do we actually start to figure out what were the rides like when it was rainy? Because we're going to do some fun stuff from there, which is, let's go write another Snowflake transform here. We're going to go find our rainy days from here. And what we're going to call that is, we're actually going to call this rides with weather. So now I can start to see all of my rides in Snowflake again, and I can start to see the weather data with it. But let's say we want to go even beyond that, and we want to see, how do people tip when it rains? Are people nicer? Are they not quite as nice? Hopefully they're nicer. But to do that, let's say we want to break out a SQL. We want to start to do some of the really neat things inside of Snowflake, and we actually want to do things in Snowpark itself, because Snowpark's a pretty amazing thing. We see so many people moving more and more to Snowpark itself, and we love it ourselves. And so let's do a bit of a tip analysis here. And let's say, hey, we want to actually grab some updated data. So let's grab our rides here. We have to start to decide on a partition strategy, which we're not going to worry about that, because that's in the 200 level course. We're going to worry about the 100 level course for the time being. But let's actually write our Snowpark transformation itself. See here, really simple interface, make it really easy just to toss in some Python, and away we go. And all of a sudden, using the same warehouse, same infrastructure, I can now write Python-based transformations on top of that. So this whole thing now is a fully running, fully automated data pipeline, where at the end, I can actually see what my average tip is based on the passenger count and whether or not it's rainy. But this is just where I get started. One of the really magical things about Ascend is, what if I want to change something in my pipeline? As I mentioned before, it's this monitoring, this fingerprinting of change, whether it's in code or data, and seeing some of the magic there. So what happens if, for example, I go back and I'm an analyst and I decide, I grew up in the Northwest. What we Californians think of rainy is not rainy. A tenth of an inch is not rainy. It's got to be at least a quarter of an inch to really count as rain. What you see here is the Ascend engine kicking it into overdrive and saying, hey, you changed fundamentally the definition of rainy. I can track all the things that depended on that definition. And this is now the Ascend engine working in concert with the Snowflake engine, say, hey, go repair all of that data. Like, we have changed our logic itself. Go repair this data, the rainy days data. I have to go over quickly because Snowflake's too fast and it's going to process everything before I finish talking. And so now all of that workload is going through Snowflake and it's all being updated according to the new definitions themselves, completely automatically. That's really cool. And so this is just the start of how those pipelines work. As you'll see here, I can do other really neat things, like I can add in data quality checks for my pipelines. So as I have data coming through, I can actually say, hey, I expect that this data is null or not null or within these ranges, so I can now trust my data more, and those get enforced as part of the pipeline skill. I can also hop up here and I can actually look at things like processing times. So as I'm trying to optimize my pipelines, I can similarly look at the data that was just going through here. It's so fast, you kind of have to zoom in a lot, but I think that's part of the power of Snowflake. And here I can actually, let me zoom back in. I can actually see all of my data processing through and how fast it goes to track bottlenecks in my data pipelines, all with these operational observability capabilities.
This demo that you've shown here is pretty incredible. I love the fact that you have, frontline and center Snowpark for Python. I love hearing how you've seen in your own customers the adoption of Snowpark for Python. It's really impressive. I think the level of tight integration that Ascend has with Snowflake. And I think that tight integration, from looking at it from this demo, has really paid off in dividends for how much power your platform brings to your customers. It's, again, I think the level of detail, the scope of what your platform is able to do is pretty impressive. I want to learn more about why and how did you choose Snowflake? What was your thought process when looking at Snowflake, and what was that point in time, that tipping point of, yes, like, I'm going all in on Snowflake?
Well, I feel like there's a couple of aspects to this. One, the Snowflake product is so compelling. The ease of use, the performance, the price performance are incredibly compelling. The second was the introduction of Snowpark, because outside of our demo pipelines, we have so many internal pipelines, and our customers write so many other pipelines, and the ability to open up access to more code forward solutions with open source libraries you can build on top of, the world just expands dramatically. And today we now see about 30% of data transformation logic across our customer base being written in Python, which is amazing.
Yeah.
And so the ability to actually use that single data cloud to write SQL, to write Python, if you really want to, Java and Scala too, though I think mostly these days it's probably more Python oriented. And I think that beyond those two and the amazing product capabilities, the other really compelling part is Snowflake is where we see the majority of customers going. And so the gravity, not the data gravity, but the actual industry gravity as well, we saw moving so much, and so many of our customers and so many of the new conversations we were having with folks really wanting to harness the power of Snowflake and all of these amazing new capabilities, pulled us, drew us, had us running even faster there, because I think it is certainly where we see so much momentum being built today.
It makes total sense. I mean, especially for a data pipeline product, that network effect that Snowflake brings of where the data is residing with your customers, it makes obvious sense to work on that platform. One of the things that I want to learn more about is, you mentioned Ascend uses Ascend in your own data pipelines. I think one, it makes total sense that you would, and I feel like you being your own customer really helps to perfect a product that data pipeline engineers want to use. Tell me about, your experience using your own product to do your own data pipelines.
There's an active debate inside of Ascend right now as to whether it's considered eating your own dog food or drinking your own champagne. Either way, I think it's really ensuring that you use your product. And even for me as a CEO, I'm in our product almost daily, not just poking around, playing with the fun new features, but literally building pipelines in our product. And I think that's so incredibly important as it drives us to make really great decisions for our customers and really great decisions around our partners as well. And so I think the really using your product inside of your own operations, it really has really driven us to build much better product capabilities for our customers.
I could not agree more. I mean, I think being your own customer is one of the best ways to put your customers first. And so you mentioned a couple things, right? We talked about how Ascend utilizes and has a tight integration with Snowpark Python. You mentioned, a few of the other capabilities that you're really, tapping into with Snowflake. What are some of the key features of Snowflake that Ascend uses today? And how has those features impacted both, the velocity of development for Ascend and the ease of use for the platform?
Yeah, the obviously a lot of the core engine capabilities, the scalability and the performance, and very, very heavy users of Snowpark, as I mentioned. One of the other parts that we use a lot is the scalability, the elasticity of Snowflake. I think, as every company is frogging their way through 2023, trying to find, how you optimize your costs and your infrastructure, for us, it's been really great for not just us internally, but for us as our customers to also really get the most price performance capabilities out with Snowflake by using things like auto-scaled warehouses, which again, as a company that processes huge amounts of data with a bunch of engineers that like to write a ton of pipelines, you would imagine how fast we can scale up really big infrastructure and utilize it and scale it down. So I think that's a really important one in the modern era. The other part that we're really starting to invest a lot in is around data sharing itself. I think this is so incredibly important as we can do it safely, securely, cost effectively, and in a way where it doesn't leave the data cloud. And I think that's so important and part of that data gravity that we were talking about just a little bit earlier.
Yeah, and I love that you mentioned data sharing, because to me that is a fundamental differentiator that Snowflake provides out of the box that I think a lot of people, it doesn't fully click. Like what is the power of native data sharing? And on one end, it means that if today traditionally legacy is if you have data sitting somewhere, many times you'll have an API wrapper around that data. So you have to build an interface to interface with the data, and then you have to transform that data, store it somewhere. But with native data sharing, it's simply there. It's ready to query, and you still have that programmatic control over the access of that data that you get out of the box with Snowflake. So I love that you mentioned data sharing, and that's something that Ascend is really putting a lot of time and effort into. From here, over the next 6 months, what would you say is, one or two things that Ascend customers should get really excited about?
I think there's a few things that Ascend customers should get really excited about. One is we're massively expanding our connector set itself. For those who tragically can't yet just tap into shared data already inside of Snowflake itself, we want to make sure that we can get any and all data into Snowflake. And I think that's job number one for Ascend and for our customers, is to remove all of those hurdles and encumbrances to get your data into the data cloud. The second piece that our customers are going to see us really investing a lot in is going to be around the enhanced performance of your data pipelines themselves. The more metadata we collect, the more intelligent we can make those, the faster, safer we think we can help your data pipelines run on top of the data cloud itself. And then I think the third area where we're going to see continued really great expansion is specifically in the data sharing itself. The more natively we can integrate with that whole ecosystem with our customers, I think the more seamless we can make that entire data lifecycle for our customers.
I know I'm excited about that roadmap. That's going to be pretty cool to see. So Sean, I want to say a big thank you for joining me in the studio today. Where should people go to learn more about you and about Ascend?
So if people want to learn more about me and Ascend, they should just go to ascend.io, and you can find tons of information about Ascend and the business. And even more excitingly, I think, is you can actually go and sign up to use Ascend for free as part of our Ascend Cloud offering itself. Within just a matter of minutes, you can have your entire Snowflake cloud connected to Ascend, be off to the races, tapping into and ingesting more data, building a bunch of really advanced EOT pipelines, and automating that data lifecycle. And so I'd strongly encourage anybody interested to go have a look and get your hands on top of Ascend.
And for all of our viewers, if you want to learn more about how to build your business or application on Snowflake, be sure and check out developers.snowflake.com. And if you want to see other interviews like this, be sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel. My name is Daniel Myers, and this has been another episode of Powered by Snowflake. See you next time.